started a small business and had a few guards working for me. And yeah, nothing major, but we made a bit of money, and I had some good serviceability at the time, and I was buying and selling properties and learning that, yeah, if you're going to flip a property, you really need to make a lot of money. You can't do it on the smaller ones. So there was a lot of trial and error. There was a lot of learning in the early days. And I think before 2013 came around, I'd bought and sold maybe 8 properties or something like that. So I went to seminars, there was plenty that I was learning. My property journey before, I bought 14 properties in 12 months. Before that was an 8-year journey.
Okay.
So it doesn't happen overnight. Like I'm just a regular guy, and I, read a lot of the magazines and went to seminars and learned, and a lot of trial and error. I mean, I think I spent $30,000 on a unit renovation once upon a time in 2007. That was absolutely stupid. Like I wouldn't spend 30 grand on a house renovation today.
But you learned that.
But I learned that. I learned the hard way, and you just do it. You take a shot. So I think that's.
Well, that's good. So you had before that story, or what you're known for, I guess, in the media, is that the 14 properties in 12 months.
Yeah.
Great that you've pointed that out. That didn't happen because you woke up and bought 14 properties. It happened from security business. Then it happened from 8 years of seminars, learning, renovations, and that gave you the experience to then do that amazing thing that you achieved, which was the 14 property in 12 months, which did get the headlines from the media guys. Yeah. Let's talk about that and then go into how you got to 14 in 12 months.
Yeah. It was interesting because I was, obviously, as you touched on, had a lot of experience up until that point. And the goal was to only buy 4 or 5 properties. If I could get 4 or 5, that would be awesome. I'd have what I'd classify as a portfolio, and I had 3 properties up till then. And yeah, I wanted to, go and build that portfolio. So I went and had an amazing year. And instead of the 4 or 5, I ended up buying 1 a month. And I was like, oh, geez, I really want to get to 10. The goal was to get to 10. And I was doing it every month. And I was just buying another property and another property and another property. And then wanted to buy, eventually I was like, I'll buy 1 a month for the year of 2013. That'll be pretty cool. And I ended up surpassing that and buying 14 in the 12 months. So statistically, an amazing feat when you compare it to, a lot of property investors and everything, and serviceability was a lot easier back then.
Yeah, right? I was going to say,
here's a funny story so you can understand sort of how I did it. Actually, before I get to that, let me talk about the strategy. The strategy is the same as what I use today, and that is buy below replacement value, buy in a growth market, buy under market value if you can, buy with a good yield, and buy with the X factor, the ability to add value, renovate, subdivide, etc. So that hasn't changed. That's still the same today, and that strategy I don't feel is going to change in my lifetime. But, whilst doing that, I did really well by buying, $300,000 property back then, a townhouse, for example. I'd buy it for $220,000. You'd spend $6 grand on the renovation. You'd revalue it's worth $300,000. You'd buy a $250,000 house that's worth $290,000. Yeah. That was a townhouse. I bought a $260,000 house that was worth $340,000 after the renovation. So, you're constantly adding value. You're buying well, and then you're adding value, and that's what it is. But we didn't have the data. I didn't have the data back then. So everything was just based on asset selection and, using that ultimate strategy and executing it well. Because the funny thing was I was acting like a buyer's agent back then without knowing it, because I was, I'd made contacts with agents. They knew who I was. Yeah. They knew I was serious, and all the same stuff that I do today, I was doing back then before I had a buyer's agency. So I was doing that. And then the funny story is, whilst I was doing that and buying those properties, you'd get a loan for each one with a different bank, and each bank would give you a credit card, and the credit card might be 10 or 15K. Yeah. I eventually, after 5 or 6, there's a light bulb moment. I can't remember how many properties it was after, and they all sit in this drawer, and there's a whole bunch of credit cards, and I'm like, that little light bulb moment hit me, and I'm like, oh, hang on a sec. What if I empty out these credit cards? Take all the money off each one of them.
Are they business related, or was it?
Well, no, from the loans from the house.
Oh, okay.
So when you get a loan with CBA for property 1, you get a loan from, NAB, for example, for property 2, and then you eventually end up having all these credit cards that they give you with each home loan. So they give you like a
home credit card, okay.
So then what I do is they just collect in a drawer, and eventually I was just like, hang on a sec, what if I empty all these credit cards at 22% interest or whatever it is, and I take the cash out and I put it in another bank, and I use that as a deposit to get an approval to get the next one.
Wow.
So I'm just paying. So, but this is not financial advice. This is my story, and this is not something I recommend other people do.
Well, it's probably a bit harder to do that today anyway, wouldn't it be?
You wouldn't be able to do this today. You wouldn't be able to do this today. Let's make that clear.
Some kid sitting at home trying to like do it now. Great advice. No.
But yeah, so I essentially, then when you got another loan and got another approval and yeah, it was, you get another loan and then because you're buying that under market value, you know what you're doing. You eventually refinance that and then out of the equity on the property, you later on you take the money back out of that and then you pay the credit card off.
Yeah. Okay. So you had a bit of a system.
So you've got another property, you've added another asset to your total portfolio value. And yeah, that's how that works. So that's another way. That's how, I was buying incredibly well. Yeah. I was buying incredibly well. I was doing the renovations and not overcapitalizing on it. And the market did a bit of work. And it was just, it's a pretty cool story looking back on it. I don't think I appreciated it as much back in the day.
Probably used that little bit of Western Sydney kid